the entire World War II. From the German perspective, Germany entered World War II with a simple, carefully considered strategy: attack everyone, preferably all at once, and somehow finish before anybody noticed that Germany did not have enough fuel, food, ships, trucks, or functioning common sense for a long war. For the first 2 years, this strategy worked disturbingly well. Then, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Then, America joined. Then Britain refused to disappear. And suddenly, the German war plan looked less like military genius and more like a man juggling knives while setting his own house on fire. But to understand how Germany reached this position, we need to return to 1919. Germany had just lost World War I. Its economy was damaged, its monarchy was gone, and the Treaty of Versailles imposed military restrictions, territorial losses, and reparations. The German army was limited to 100,000 men, no tanks, no air force, no submarines. Basically, Germany was told, "You may have an army, but only the decorative version." Many Germans viewed the treaty as humiliating. Political violence spread, democratic governments struggled, and the Great Depression arrived to make everything significantly worse. Then, Adolf Hitler appeared. Hitler promised to restore German power, destroy communism, overturn Versailles, unite ethnic Germans, acquire territory, and provide someone convenient to blame for every national problem. His movement was built on dictatorship, racism, anti-Semitism, conspiracy theories, political violence, and the powerful governing principle of shouting until people stopped asking questions. Hitler became chancellor in January 1933. Germany was still officially following Versailles. Unofficially, Germany began pressing the enormous red button marked "Definitely Not Rearmament." Factories expanded, military research accelerated, pilots trained secretly. Public construction projects reduced unemployment while also preparing roads, industry, and infrastructure for war. The government financed much of this through hidden debt and accounting tricks. Government official: "Are we spending billions on weapons?" Nazi economist: "No." Government official: "What are those?" Nazi economist: "Agricultural tanks." Government official: "They have cannons." Nazi economist: "Aggressive agriculture." In 1935, Hitler stopped pretending. Germany introduced conscription, openly established the Luftwaffe, expanded the army, and began building submarines. Britain and France objected. Politely, Germany then remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, sending troops into territory that was supposed to remain demilitarized. The German commanders were nervous. If France had responded immediately, the troops had orders to withdraw. France did not respond. Hitler learned an extremely dangerous lesson. International agreements were apparently suggestions. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria. This was called the Anschluss. Hitler: "Austria should join Germany." Austria: "Do we get a vote?" Hitler: "You get German soldiers." Next came the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia containing many ethnic Germans and much of Czechoslovakia's defensive system. Britain and France met Hitler in Munich and accepted the transfer, hoping this would satisfy him and prevent war. Hitler promised he had no further territorial demands in Europe. This promise lasted approximately 5 months. In March 1939, German troops occupied the rest of the Czech lands. Europe finally realized that Hitler might not be a reliable negotiating partner. An astonishing discovery. Britain and France guaranteed Poland's independence. Hitler still wanted Poland, but attacking Poland risked war with the Western powers and possibly the Soviet Union. So Germany signed a non-aggression pact with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Publicly, the two dictators promised peace. Secretly, they agreed to divide much of Eastern Europe between them. Hitler: "We hate communism." Stalin: "We hate fascism." Both, but we do enjoy dividing Poland. To justify an invasion, German operatives staged fake Polish attacks along the border, including an assault on a German radio station. The attackers were actually Germans wearing Polish uniforms. It was state-sponsored historical cosplay, except people died. and an entire continent was about to explode. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Aircraft attacked airfields, communications, transportation, and military positions. Armored columns punched through weak points. Motorized units moved rapidly behind them. Infantry followed to secure territory and eliminate surrounded resistance. This combination of speed, concentration, radio coordination, armor, and air support became popularly known as Blitzkrieg. Lightning War. German commander: we found resistance. Headquarters: go around it. Commander: what about the enemy? Headquarters: that sounds like a problem for the infantry. Polish forces fought hard, but they were attacked from several directions and struggled to reorganize beneath German air superiority. Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd. Hitler had apparently expected another strongly worded conference. Instead, Germany was now officially fighting two major powers. Fortunately for Germany, very little happened in the West immediately. This period became known as the Phony War. France: we have declared war. Germany: are you attacking? France: let us not become unreasonable. Then, on September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east. Warsaw surrendered near the end of the month. Poland was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union. German forces and occupation authorities began mass arrests, expulsions, executions, and the destruction of Polish institutions. Jewish communities were confined, persecuted, robbed, and increasingly concentrated in ghettos. The war was already becoming more than a territorial conflict. It was becoming the racial and ideological war Nazi leadership had always intended. After Poland, Germany invaded Denmark and Norway in April 1940. Denmark surrendered within hours. Norway lasted longer, but German forces secured key ports and protected access to Swedish iron ore. Then, Germany turned west. France expected the main attack to come through Belgium, broadly repeating Germany's World War I strategy. Germany encouraged this belief by attacking the Netherlands and Belgium. Allied armies moved north to meet them. Then, Germany sent its main armored force through the Ardennes. Allied planners considered the dense, hilly forest unsuitable for a massive armored attack. German generals considered this an exciting traffic management challenge. Thousands of vehicles squeezed through narrow roads. Had the Allies discovered and bombed the columns effectively, the invasion might have become history's largest military parking lot. They did not. German forces crossed the Meuse near Sedan, broke through French defenses, and raced toward the English Channel. The Allied armies in Belgium were cut off. Britain: France: where are the Germans? France: behind us. Britain: how? France: they drove through the forest. Britain: the forest we said was impossible? France: that particular forest. British and French troops retreated to Dunkirk. For reasons still debated, German armored units paused outside the evacuation area. The Luftwaffe was expected to help finish the job. Instead, Britain evacuated more than 300,000 Allied soldiers using naval vessels and hundreds of civilian boats. The British lost most of their heavy equipment, but they saved the core of their army. Germany then resumed its offensive. Paris fell in June 1940. France requested an armistice after only 6 weeks of major fighting. Germany had defeated one of Europe's strongest military powers with shocking speed. Inside Germany, celebrations erupted. Hitler's reputation soared. German generals concluded that rapid warfare was an unstoppable formula. Poland had collapsed. France had collapsed. The Netherlands and Belgium had collapsed. The obvious conclusion was that everyone would collapse. This was not the correct conclusion. Britain remained in the war. Hitler hoped Britain would negotiate. Prime Minister Winston Churchill instead promised continued resistance. So Germany prepared Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. There was one small issue: the English Channel. There was another issue: the Royal Navy. And a third issue: the Royal Air Force. Germany first needed air superiority. The Luftwaffe attacked British shipping, radar stations, airfields, and aircraft facilities. But Britain had radar, an effective air defense network, experienced command systems, and pilots operating close to home. German fighter escorts had limited range. German bombers were vulnerable. Downed British pilots could return to combat. Downed German pilots became prisoners. Then German strategy shifted toward bombing London and other cities. This caused enormous civilian suffering, but gave damaged RAF airfields and command facilities valuable time to recover. Hermann Göring had confidently promised that his Luftwaffe could destroy British air power. The Luftwaffe could not. Göring: Britain's air force is almost finished. British aircraft: hello. Göring: that one does not count. Britain survived the Battle of Britain. Operation Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely, which is military language for "we are putting this plan in a drawer and hoping nobody mentions it again." Germany had suffered its first major strategic failure. Naturally, Hitler responded by opening the largest land campaign in history. Before that, Germany became involved in the Mediterranean. Italy, led by Benito Mussolini, had entered the war hoping to collect territory from a conflict Germany appeared to have already won. Italy attacked British positions in North Africa. The attack failed. Italy invaded Greece. That also failed. Germany sent forces into the Balkans and North Africa to rescue its ally. General Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps drove British forces back and gained a reputation for aggressive mobile warfare. But North Africa depended on supplies crossing the Mediterranean. Ships needed fuel to deliver fuel, so trucks could transport fuel to tanks that required fuel to capture ports that might help deliver more fuel. Logistics had become a very expensive circle. Meanwhile, Hitler had already chosen his main target: the Soviet Union. Nazi ideology viewed communism as an existential enemy, and Eastern Europe as territory to be conquered, colonized, and exploited. Hitler believed the Soviet state would collapse after a few months. Some German officers warned about distance, supply, manpower, Soviet reserves, and the possibility of a long war. Hitler responded with the strategic argument. It worked against France. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. More than 3 million Axis soldiers attacked along a front stretching nearly 3,000 kilometers. Army Group North moved toward Leningrad. Army Group Center advanced toward Moscow. Army Group South pushed into Ukraine. The initial attack was devastating. The Luftwaffe destroyed thousands of Soviet aircraft, many on the ground. Entire Soviet armies were surrounded near Minsk, Smolensk, Kiev, and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops became prisoners. German units advanced hundreds of kilometers. Berlin declared that Soviet defeat was imminent. Berlin had apparently not looked at a map. The distances were enormous. Roads were poor. Railway gauges were different. Vehicles broke down. Horses carried much of the German army's supplies because the supposedly fully mechanized Wehrmacht was far less mechanized than propaganda suggested. German supply officer: the tanks need fuel. Headquarters: send trucks. Supply officer: the trucks need fuel. Headquarters: send horses. Supply officer: the horses need food. Headquarters: have we considered winning immediately? The invasion was also a war of extermination. SS units called Einsatzgruppen followed the army and carried out mass shootings of Jewish civilians, Soviet officials, Roma, and others targeted by Nazi ideology. The Wehrmacht cooperated extensively through orders, logistics, security operations, prisoner treatment, and occupation policies. Millions of Soviet prisoners of war were deliberately starved, exposed, and killed. Villages were destroyed. Food was seized. Civilians were deported for forced labor. Across occupied Europe, Nazi persecution escalated into systematic genocide. Jewish people were deported to ghettos, killing sites, concentration camps, and extermination camps. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, Majdanek, and other sites, Nazi Germany and its collaborators murdered millions. 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, alongside millions of other victims of Nazi persecution and warfare. This was not an accidental side effect of Germany's military campaign. It was central to the regime's ideology and occupation system. By late 1941, German forces approached Moscow. Then the temperature dropped. Germany had expected victory before winter and had not adequately equipped many soldiers for extreme cold. Oil froze, engines failed, weapons jammed, men suffered frostbite, and the Soviet Union, very inconsiderately, continued existing. Fresh Soviet forces counterattacked in December and pushed German units away from Moscow. The quick Eastern campaign was over. Then Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Germany was not required by its treaty with Japan to declare war on the United States, because Japan had initiated the conflict. Hitler declared war anyway. United States. We were focused on Japan. Hitler. Fight us too. United States. Are you certain? Hitler. Absolutely. Germany was now fighting Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Together, these enemies had vastly greater industrial capacity, manpower, resources, and access to oil. The German strategy now depended on defeating all of them before mathematics became involved. In 1942, Germany launched another major offensive in the Soviet South, seeking the Caucasus oil fields. Part of the force moved towards Stalingrad. The city had strategic value because it sat along the Volga. It also carried Stalin's name, which made it irresistible to two dictators who understood branding better than restraint. German troops entered the city and became trapped in brutal street fighting. Buildings changed hands repeatedly. Factories became fortresses. The Luftwaffe reduced large parts of the city to rubble, creating excellent defensive terrain for Soviet troops. Then, in November 1942, Soviet forces attacked the weaker Romanian and other Axis units guarding the German flanks. They broke through and surrounded Germany's 6th Army. The German commander requested permission to break out. Hitler refused. Goering promised the Luftwaffe could supply the trapped army by air. It could not. Hitler, hold your position. 6th Army, we are surrounded, freezing, starving, and running out of ammunition. Hitler, correct, hold that position. The 6th Army surrendered in early 1943. Stalingrad destroyed the myth that Germany was invincible. Hundreds of thousands of Axis soldiers were killed, wounded, captured, or lost during the campaign. German propaganda initially avoided explaining what had happened. Then it transformed the disaster into a heroic sacrifice. Because when reality becomes unacceptable, apparently the solution is louder radio. Around the same time, Axis forces were losing North Africa. British victory at El Alamein and Allied landings in Morocco and Algeria trapped German and Italian forces between advancing armies. Axis troops in Tunisia surrendered in May 1943. The Allies then invaded Sicily. Mussolini was removed from power, and Italy sought an armistice. Germany occupied much of Italy, rescued Mussolini, and installed him as the leader of a puppet state in the north. Germany had entered the war expecting territorial expansion. It was now using troops to occupy its own ally. On the Eastern Front, Germany attempted one final major offensive at Kursk in July 1943. The Soviets knew it was coming and built enormous defensive networks. German armored forces attacked minefields, anti-tank guns, trenches, and deeply prepared positions. The offensive failed. After Kursk, Germany largely lost the strategic initiative in the east. The Red Army began pushing west. Meanwhile, British and American bombers increasingly attacked German cities, factories, railways, oil facilities, and infrastructure. Hamburg burned. Berlin was repeatedly struck. The bombing campaign killed large numbers of civilians and left millions homeless. German propaganda promised revenge through wonder weapons. These included the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 ballistic missile, advanced submarines, jet aircraft, and increasingly desperate engineering projects. Some were technologically impressive. None could solve the main problem, which was that Germany was losing everywhere. Nazi official, we have developed a revolutionary new weapon. German civilian, will it stop the Soviet army? Nazi official, it flies very fast. German civilian, that was not the question. The regime declared total war. Production increased despite bombing, partly through tighter organization and the brutal exploitation of millions of forced laborers and concentration camp prisoners. Women took larger roles in industry. Older men and teenagers were mobilized. Food and consumer goods became scarcer. propaganda shifted from promising rapid victory to demanding endless sacrifice. Inside Germany, resistance existed, but remained divided and heavily suppressed. The White Rose student group distributed anti-Nazi leaflets. Hans and Sophie Scholl and other members were arrested and executed. Religious figures criticized certain regime crimes. Youth groups rejected Nazi control. Military officers and officials secretly discussed removing Hitler. On July 20, 1944, Colonel Klaus von Schaffenberg placed a bomb near Hitler during a military conference. The bomb exploded. Hitler survived. The attempted coup collapsed within hours. Thousands were arrested, and many were executed after staged trials. Hitler became even more suspicious and increasingly interfered with military decisions. This was unfortunate because military reality was about to become extremely demanding. On June 6, 1944, the Western Allies landed in Normandy. Germany had built coastal defenses known as the Atlantic Wall, but it did not know exactly where the main invasion would occur. An elaborate Allied deception convinced German commanders that another landing might come near Calais. Armored reserves were delayed. Allied troops secured beachheads and began moving inland. Germany now faced the strategic situation it had spent years trying to avoid: a massive war on two major fronts. On June 22nd, exactly 3 years after Barbarossa, the Soviet Union launched Operation Bagration. The offensive destroyed much of Germany's Army Group Center. German lines collapsed across Belarus. The Red Army advanced hundreds of kilometers. In the west, the Allies broke out of Normandy and liberated Paris. German troops retreated toward their own borders. Hitler ordered cities and positions held at all costs. Generals requested flexible withdrawals. Hitler: no retreat. General: we may be surrounded. Hitler: still no retreat. General: then we will lose the army. Hitler: have you considered optimism? In December 1944, Germany launched a final major attack in the west through the Ardennes. The objective was to split Allied forces and capture Antwerp. The offensive created a large bulge in the Allied line, giving the battle its highly creative name. The Battle of the Bulge. German forces achieved surprise but lacked fuel, replacements, and air superiority. Once the weather cleared, Allied aircraft returned. The offensive failed. Germany had spent its last major reserves accomplishing a temporary shape. By early 1945, Allied armies entered Germany from the west while Soviet forces crossed into Germany from the east. German cities were ruins. Railways were shattered. Fuel supplies were collapsing. The government mobilized the Volkssturm, consisting largely of teenagers and older men with limited training. Young recruit: what is the plan? Officer: defend Berlin. Recruit: against how many Soviet soldiers? Officer: do not ruin morale with numbers. Hitler remained in his bunker beneath Berlin, issuing orders to divisions that barely existed. On maps, German units moved decisively. Outside the bunker, many of these units had no fuel, few soldiers, or no ability to move at all. Hitler blamed generals, civilians, and the German people for the defeat. The leader who had demanded absolute loyalty now decided everyone else had disappointed him. Soviet troops surrounded Berlin in April 1945. Street fighting consumed the capital. On April 30th, Hitler killed himself. Before his death, he appointed Admiral Karl Donitz as president of what remained of Germany. German forces surrendered in stages. The unconditional surrender took effect on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over. Germany was occupied and divided among the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Its cities were devastated. Millions of German soldiers and civilians were dead. Millions more were displaced or imprisoned. The full scale of the concentration camps and extermination system was exposed. Nazi leaders were captured and tried at Nuremberg. Some were executed. Others received prison sentences. Many perpetrators escaped immediate justice, returned to civilian life, or concealed their roles for years. Germany had begun the war claiming it would overturn humiliation, secure prosperity, and establish a 1,000-year empire. The regime lasted 12 years. Its major war lasted less than 6. It conquered much of Europe, murdered millions, devastated entire countries, and ultimately brought destruction upon Germany itself. From the German perspective, The military story moved through 3 stages. First, we are unstoppable. Then, this setback is temporary. Finally, every city must fight to the last person while the leadership hides underground. Germany's early victories were real, but they encouraged catastrophic overconfidence. The regime confused speed with unlimited strength. It confused fear with loyalty. It confused propaganda with reality. And it believed that ideological certainty could defeat geography, logistics, industrial capacity, and nearly every major power on Earth. It could not. That is World War II from the German perspective. Build a war machine in secret. Conquer your neighbors at terrifying speed. Assume every future enemy will collapse exactly like the previous one. Invade the largest country on Earth. Declare war on the largest industrial economy on Earth. Refuse every sensible retreat. Lose everything. Then discover that calling something a 1,000-year Reich does not automatically add the remaining 988 years.